There's a kind of silence that doesn't just fill the room, it tightens around your chest. That night, it wasn't the clatter of plates or the hum of conversation that stood out. It was the absence of something much deeper, a silence that screamed louder than any fight. I was Fevinin. My father had just returned from the hospital. His movements were slower, his voice weaker, but my teenage arrogance, it was loud. I remember snapping at him over something absurd, probably a curfew. He looked at me not with anger, not even with disappointment, but with exhaustion. And in that moment, I didn't see a man who had spent his life sacrificing for his family. I just saw an obstacle to my freedom. That's when my grandmother, who rarely spoke, said something that froze my blood. She said, "A tree wants peace, but the wind will never let it rest. A child wants to care, but the parents might already be gone." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Her words dropped into the silence like stones in a still pond, rippling outward, reshaping everything. That sentence haunted me for years. Have you ever thought about what it means to owe someone your existence, and yet ignore their sacrifices as though they were invisible? We live in a world obsessed with chasing dreams, claiming independence, becoming self-made. But at what cost? There's an old Eastern saying, passed from generation to generation, Hiu de vitien. It means filial piety comes before all virtues, before courage, before wisdom, even before faith. Why? Because without respect for those who gave you life, what foundation do you stand on? In the West, we often speak of honoring parents. But in many Eastern traditions, filial piety is sacred. It's not just a nice idea, it's the spine of moral character. You don't just love your parents when it's convenient, you honor them even when they fail. You care for them not because it's easy, but because it's right. But here's the twist no one talks about. Honoring your parents doesn't always mean obeying them. Sometimes it means forgiving them. Sometimes it means understanding their trauma before they had a chance to heal. Sometimes it means loving them, especially when they don't know how to love you back. That's where the real depth of filial piety begins. And let me tell you, it's not for the faint of heart. But why does this matter today? Because in a world where voices grow louder, where pride replaces humility, and where family dinners are traded for phone screens, we're losing something irreplaceable. We're trading deep roots for fleeting trends, and in doing so, we risk forgetting who we are and where we came from. If this strikes something deep inside you, stay with me, because what I'm about to share with you next will shake everything you thought you knew about love, legacy, and what it really means to honor those who came before you. Subscribe to this channel. Hit that bell. This is just the beginning of a journey, not only into history or tradition, but into the soul. The ancient world did not see family as an option. It was the origin, the center, the axis around which every soul turned. To dishonor one's parents was not merely shameful, it was unthinkable. In Confucian thought, filial piety wasn't just a virtue. It was the seed from which all other virtues grew. Remove it, and the entire moral structure collapses. Let me take you to a story. Old, almost mythical. But true. There was once a young man named Guo Ju, who lived in China during the Han Dynasty. He and his wife were so poor they could barely feed themselves, let alone their infant son. But Guo Ju had something even more pressing than hunger. A mother who had grown weak, frail, and sick with age. In their desperation, the couple began to wonder aloud, should they continue to feed the baby, or give what little food they had to the elderly mother? And then, Guoju made a decision that shocks even the most hardened heart. He took a shovel, walked into the forest, and began digging to bury his own child, so he could use the food to keep his mother alive. It sounds monstrous, insane. But what happened next is where the universe seems to whisper its response. As he dug, his shovel struck something hard. He uncovered a buried cache of gold. Engraved on it were words from the emperor himself, "For the man of filial piety, heaven rewards." Now, whether you believe this literally or not, the message is clear. The universe bows to those who bow to their roots. That's not superstition, that's soul. Still, let's not romanticize suffering. In today's world, many carry wounds from their parents, wounds deeper than words can express. Abuse, neglect, abandonment. To those listening who have endured these pains, I hear you. Filial piety is not blind submission. It is not erasing your trauma. It is not saying they hurt me, but I must love them anyway. No. Real filial piety, the kind that cracks stone, is the courage to see your parents as human, not as perfect gods, not as monsters, but as flawed beings shaped by their own scars. And if you can go one step further, if you can forgive, not to set them free, but to set yourself free, then you have already honored them in a way most never dare. Let me bring you to another story. Jesus, as he hung on the cross, bloodied and gasping, looked down at his mother Mary, and even in his dying breath, he said to his beloved disciple John, "Behold your mother," and to Mary, "Behold your son." In that sacred moment, as the world trembled beneath him, the Son of God fulfilled his duty as a son. Think about that. Even while saving all of humanity, Jesus honored his mother. What does that say to you? It says that even divinity does not excuse us from human responsibility. Even greatness must kneel before gratitude. And maybe that's the missing link in our generation. We chase greatness, we chase identity, we chase enlightenment. But how can you become whole when you haven't even honored the hands that first carried you? Now you might say, but I've moved on. I live thousands of miles away. My parents don't even speak my language. Let me tell you something. Filial piety isn't measured in geography. It's measured in the heart. It's not about being physically close. It's about remembering who they are, praying for them, calling them, sending that message even when you don't feel like it, or telling your children their names so they're never forgotten. Because when we forget them, we forget ourselves. Subscribe if you feel this in your chest right now. This is not about religion. This is about your roots, your soul, your story. Stay with me. In the final part, I'll take you where no philosophy book can, into the raw truth of what happens when filial piety is lost and when it's finally found. Have you ever seen a tree collapse in the middle of a storm? Not from the wind, but from within, because its roots were rotten or forgotten. That is what happens to a soul who forgets their origin. They may rise high, branch out wide, even bloom with temporary success, but when the storm comes, and it always does, they fall silently, completely. Filial piety is the root. Lose it, and everything above it begins to rot. Let me tell you one final story. There was a man, powerful, famous, the kind of person the world bows to. His name doesn't matter. What matters is this. In the height of his wealth, with cameras flashing and crowds cheering, he would retreat into silence every Mother's Day. Not a post, not a celebration, just silence. When asked why, he said quietly, "I betrayed my mother's last wish. She died thinking I'd become someone else. I gave the world everything, except what she asked." That pain, the pain of dishonoring your origin, lingers longer than poverty or failure. It eats you in moments of victory when the applause fades and you're left with your truth. But there's still hope. Always hope. Filial piety isn't something you prove with money or grand gestures or elaborate rituals. It's proven in the quiet choices, like returning a call even when you're tired, like speaking gently when you want to shout, like choosing not to shame them in front of others, like remembering their birthdays, like kneeling by their graves, not for them, but for the child inside you that still longs for their embrace. You see, honoring your parents is never about their perfection. It's about your wholeness, because when you honor those who gave you life, you reclaim your place in the chain of life itself. You're not just a leaf blowing in the wind, you're connected, rooted, unshakable. And that's when the real transformation begins. In the Quran, God says, "And we have enjoined upon man to be good and dutiful to his parents." In the Torah, "Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long." And in the Dhammapada, to support one's father and mother, to cherish wife and children, and to be engaged in peaceful occupation, this is the greatest blessing. Across every faith, every culture, every ancient wisdom, this one truth repeats itself. He who honors his roots will never be lost. So let me leave you with this. If your parents are still alive, call them tonight. If they're gone, light a candle, say their names, speak to them in your heart. And if you are a parent yourself, teach your children where they come from so they never drift too far from who they are. Because in the end, it's not money or fame or intellect that holds the soul steady. It's love, it's remembrance, it's the silent bow of the heart toward home. Hugh de Vitien. Filial piety comes first. Subscribe if this touched something deep inside you. Follow the channel if you believe the world needs more remembrance, more honor, more heart. Because when we forget where we come from, we forget where we're going. But when we remember, the whole world becomes sacred again.